Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Kristoffer Borgli, a writer and director whose short film Former Cult Member Hears Music for the First Time and feature film Sick of Myself established his very specific, very clever voice. His English language debut, Dream Scenario, is another evolution, casting Nicolas Cage as a middle-aged college professor who resents the success of his colleagues and hopes for his own work to be as renowned, only to find himself becoming globally famous when he starts inexplicably turning up in people's dreams. It's playing in the US and Toronto right now, and it opens theatrically across the rest of Canada this Friday, and you should definitely see it. Kristoffer chose Lars Von Trier's The Idiots, the second film produced under the Danish Dogma 95 movement's Vows of Chastity, which imposed severe limits on filmmakers in order to remove the artifice of cinema. This one stars Bodil Jørgensen as a young woman who falls in with a group of people who have chosen to embrace provocation to shatter the veneer of polite society, mostly by thrashing and collapsing in public places. Taking up residence in a crumbling mansion, they form a commune of rebels, but that's not exactly a sustainable proposition. It is called The Idiots, after all. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I chose The Idiots because of its sort of relevance to me as a Scandinavian person who fell in love with cinema at an early age, or on my late teens or mid-teens. I guess I started thinking about becoming a filmmaker myself, and I think Lars Von Trier was just an example that existed in proximity. It wasn't Hollywood. It was Scandinavian filmmaking, and it had its very specific tone, and I felt that I could relate to the sort of sardonic nature of his work, and it just has been important to me from an early age, and still is. Like, he's still one of my favorite filmmakers.
He holds a certain fascination for me as well, in that I seem to like and hate every other one of his films in order. I don't know why exactly, but there's going to be one that I like, and then immediately after that, he'll disappoint me in some way.
Well, I think he's like not very interested in repeating himself. So if
Sure.
he fell in love with one specific thing, he won't do that again.
Oh yeah, he'll almost actively resist it.
Yeah,
I think, and this one. Well, I'll provide some context in the introduction about the Dogma movement, but I was around at TIFF when they started postering the festival venues with the manifesto.
okay.
In '95, and we all just sort of regarded it with curiosity more than anything else. And then The Idiots really feels like the defining statement that this is what they wanted it to be. Even more so than the Celebration, just because the Celebration feels so suffocating and interior, and The Idiots is all over the place and just moving around. It has much more of a guerrilla feel to it to me, in that he's just running down streets with people and following them into the world and using all of it as a set.
And I feel like the form reflects the themes or the philosophy of the group in the film.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of being sort of fed up with the polite, or even the artifice of being a social person in our society, and then also the artifice of film, and being like sort of seeing its limitations and problems with artifice is like reflected in both the script and the filmmaking.
Yeah, it's its own commentary. It's its own cautionary against embracing, or not embracing, but it's its own cautionary against pushing too hard against people's expectations, I suspect. I mean, Von Trier had been doing that all along, but this one, and it's hard to explain to people now, I found, just how shocking it was to see the Dogma films from Von Trier specifically, because his earlier films were so textural and sleek. And then when he did even something like Breaking the Waves, which is kind of it's not a Dogma film, but it embraces a great deal of the filmmaking choices. It felt messy and rebellious in a way that people just didn't see coming from him. And I mean, must have been blindsided by it, but I think it might actually be his best film. It's the moment where, for me anyway, it feels like he's embracing every possibility and channeling it all through performances that really pay off emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, he's not embracing every possibility. I think that with his sort of later work from Antichrist on, he did embrace the possibilities of mood through cinematography in a different way.
Sure.
It feels like with The Idiots, it really is about stripping everything down to the core of the idea itself, and not relying on any sort of tricks, and I really like his later work too, where he does embrace the like form and style and music, but I think I chose The Idiots because of, like, I saw it when I was 16 or something for the first time, and to me it was like the Jackass of, for me, like,
Yeah.
the label with Jackass was like, don't attempt this at home, and I feel like The Idiot should have that label, because I started like doing the things in the movie. I was so impressionable that I thought this was like cool and fun, and I started like spazzing in my little hometown, and I was like so swept up in it, not just as an artwork or a film, but as like an idea that could be applied to life, which in retrospect seems really silly, but it had that effect on me. And later in my life, I've come to think of what he was doing there with Dogma as the echo of the French New Wave, and the French New Wave being the moment in film history where movies became self-aware, and then sort of after the French New Wave, it sort of like disappeared again, and lost the self-awareness. And then here was like at least another sort of attempt at shaking the format loose of tradition to find something else, and I really like that. I like that. I don't think that we're done with sort of form. We haven't found the final form of cinema yet. I think we should explore and investigate and be curious. And I think Lars Von Trier was like really brave for doing it at a moment where he was finally sort of embraced and championed as a, like a household name as a director, and then this is what he follows up with. It's really ballsy, and he's very punk in that sense, and that's why, like, this movie is so interesting to watch a master of cinema just strip everything down. And it feels a little bit like what happened with art as a response to the camera. You had painters who were just expert at anatomically correct representation of a scenery, and then the photograph comes and sort of takes that whole idea and makes it easy. Anyone can do it. And so you have people like Picasso, who sort of makes it a conceptual idea of representation through art. And Picasso knew how to paint anatomically correct. He had that skill. And that's important, I think, to be able to know which parts you're stripping away, and to be able to kind of choose when to not adapt or adopt the sort of traditional form exercises. And it's like, it looks easy to make The Idiots, but it actually isn't. It's no. Picasso had this thing where he's drawing seagulls on a napkin and selling them for like $50 a piece, and someone comes up to him like, why should I pay $50 for something that took you 5 seconds to draw? And he said, it didn't take 5 seconds, this took 20 years or something like that. And that feels true to the idiots too. It's like, it looks like a very easy thing to do, but of course it's taken him his whole life to come to that point where he can do that.
Yeah, what struck me rewatching it this time was the sense that, well, it's the liberation that's present, right? The sense of absolute freedom that they've given themselves by stripping away all the artifice of cinema, and just it obliterates the it is sort of it's the opposite of the French New Wave as a revolution, though, because the French New Wave was about the romance of cinema and being you get the joy of the artists who are playing inside of this thing that they've worshipped. And here it's different. We're invited in a different way because the fourth wall is gone. In some strange stage proscenium sort of thing where the lack of artifice heightens the artifice and makes us aware that it's all a movie, that it's all a put on. But it's as though in the Idiots, in less so in the Celebration, which still to me struck me as like it's brilliant, but it's a stage play that has been turned into a film. This is a film that always and only could have been cinema. And then from these two films, you have the various versions of the dogma that keep coming for the next, 10 years, where people are fighting over what it is or what it could be. Or, Harmony Korine is making his exceptions by going to places where the music is playing and then using that intentionally or setting things up in advance, but making sure they're technically diegetic. The purity in this one is that you are so uncomfortable with what you are experiencing the first time through because the actors are going for it in ways that feel, and intentionally so, right? It feels inappropriate. It feels too intimate, which in retrospect is the whole point because it brings us to that thing at the very end with Karen and her family where or Karen and her family, and you understand it's an expression of pain for her. Finally, it's something else, but it takes the whole movie to get there and you have to be immersed in it. It's like it's holding your head in this world long enough to feel.
Yeah, and that's where for me, The Idiots feels like it's a Von Trier movie because I feel like he writes in sort of the Russian tradition of like Chekhov or Tolstoy or something, where he doesn't shy away from all the ways that you can manipulate an audience with a story of the whole idea of like save the cat, of like how to make your audience feel something by manipulating them in like a very specific ways, and that he does strip away everything that relates to the technicality of shooting a movie, but he still relies on his like Russian literature way of manipulating us, the audience, and the way that movie ends with us realizing what that character was. She wasn't introduced randomly as it feels. It has like a extremely painful payoff in the end, and you realize, oh, there's a master artistry going on here, and which like I think comes naturally to Lars. I think it's probably so easy for him to write these things that he is trying to constantly make it more difficult. The manipulation of the medium of film. He doesn't want to rely on it. He wants to make it more difficult in some way, and then prove that he still can make you feel something. With Dogville. Just like telling people constantly, you're watching an artifice. This is completely constructed, and yet we feel so much. Which is like sort of like some sort of devilish trick that he's playing on us. And I really like that. And I think that movies so often has the quality of making us forget we watch a movie, that we're so neatly wrapped in something that is easy to digest and easy to box into like a certain experience, that it sort of gives us what we sort of expect at the right time, and it makes us often feel at ease with what we're watching. It's like an enjoyable thing because it's like sort of exactly what we asked for, but it might not be what we need. And I think that's what Lars is doing, is like giving us what we really need, and forcing us to sort of get rid of our labels or boxes. And in a way, that's what a drug experience is for some people. You know, they take LSD to sort of shatter the borders of how we experience life, how we see life, that there's like vastly different ways of just seeing the things that you take for granted in your day-to-day. Like you get just like swept up in an autopilot way of enjoying both life and cinema. And certain filmmakers are like interested in shattering those things to get to something new.
It's the sculpture concept, right? I mean, you chip away at something to reveal the form underneath, and here you're chipping away at literally the format of the concept of sitting in a movie. Did you actually? I should roll back on this. Did you see The Idiots in a theater? Or were you young enough to see it when it first came out?
No, I didn't see it in a theater. I saw it on probably DVD.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw it at a press screening, and it was met with either silence or open hostility. It's a remarkable experience with a crowd to feel a room. And admittedly, these are Canadian critics rather than Europeans. We all knew who Von Trier was and were familiar with his work, but there was definitely a different mindset at the time. And a couple of people absolutely despised it. Just, you could feel it. You could feel the angry shifting in the chairs. And then the ending hits and everybody just gets absolutely still.
Yeah.
And a couple of people, again, this probably the same people, because I couldn't really tell, but people were like just harumphing their way out of the theater.
Yeah.
And I just had to go walk around for a little bit and think it through.
Yeah.
And seeing it alone, I think, would be just very, very different.
Well, also, like, I'm seeing it at a point in my life where I don't have a sort of expectation of what the limits of cinema is. I'm seeing The Idiots as a person who is just getting sort of exposed to cinema. So to me, I didn't know it was breaking all those rules. So it probably felt very different for you and I to see this movie. To me, I was just seeing like, oh, this is a movie. Okay, that makes sense, I guess, But what did you feel when you saw it as a person who, has already sort of drawn a map of what movies can be?
Yeah, I'd made my decisions, I guess. I would have been 32 and familiar with Von Trier's work and the movement. And I thought, oh, this feels like a logical place for him to go. What surprised me was later when he became much more formalist again.
Yeah.
This felt like this is where he's going to go forever. He's going to live in this space because he understands it so well.
Yeah.
And it also fit with his, clearly he'd already established himself as a provocateur, both publicly and in his art. And so it just felt like he was going to keep finding more and more extreme ways to disassociate the audience within his work. And instead, weirdly enough, that's what Harmony Korine ended up doing. I mean, his latest film is shot in infrared. It's completely inaccessible to the casual moviegoer. You need to already know who he is and what he does to even begin to unpack it. And Von Trier went in a different direction. And I think part of that is his obsession with depression, and not like he has personal experience of it. But as he sharpens his toolbox with films like Melancholy and Antichrist, it's so clear that that's his only, that's the thing he's most interested in. And when he veers out of it, even something like Nymphomaniac, which is incredibly ambitious and complex, doesn't feel as satisfying to me as the films where he digs into himself, into his own interests. But his shifting back and forth between handheld and lockdown shots, and his choice of grains and textures in the digital videos that he uses, he's continuing to be a fascinating, frustrating, evolving artist for me. And it's what I was saying about every other movie, for whatever reason, pushing me away. Like The House That Jack Built, I understand what he's doing. I simply don't care for it. And that's fine, I guess. Other people like it more than, say, Nymphomaniac or Melancholia. But when he's in that sweet spot, when he is really pulling things out of himself, however he's doing it, that's when I find myself connecting to him.
Yeah. It sort of felt like rebellious for him, I guess, to be so formally
Yeah.
flexing formally. And so that's a way for him to yet again go against expectations. But there is something in that space of, like, say, Melancholia. It has so many sequences that aren't about the script.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about the what you can achieve out of the medium itself. And he's always been like a big Tarkovsky fan, and his movies are felt more than they are cerebral.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, if I were to say my favorite Von Trier, I think it's Melancholia.
Yeah, it's up there for me too.
Yeah, but again, like, I think just because The Idiots was there so early for me, it's been, of course, like, more influential for me. It was an important film for me to watch at a young age, and also, like, important because I thought movies had to look and feel a certain way. And I was from a small town in Norway, and I was frustrated by what I felt was like a glass ceiling of what's possible to do in our culture. And he really shattered that, and sort of made me more hopeful about finding art in my like what I felt as very mundane immediate surroundings.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the Odd Streaming Project. Last week, I wrote about Universal's 4K release of Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer and Criterion's new edition of Claude Chabrol's La Cérémonie, and the launch of the label's new World Cinema imprint, Janus Contemporaries. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Simcast Twitter account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. When you did experiment with spazzing on your own, how was that received? I mean, did the film penetrate enough that other people knew what you were doing, or was it simply...
No, and also it's like the Scandinavian society is sort of like introverted and polite. So for someone to do things like that, there's nobody actually engaged or tried to intervene or anything. And I was just like going nuts in like inside stores and stuff. But people just left me alone, and I had fun with my friends. I was just performing for my own sake, I guess. And it's purely just silly and almost like maybe offensive, looking back.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, I can't remember the title, but there was a documentary fairly recently. Actually, it can't be that recent because I saw it in a theater. So 4 years ago at Hot Docs, maybe, there was a doc about a group of friends who are gamers and sliding into fascism quietly somewhere in, may have been Denmark. But their reflexive little joke with one another is to make a sound that's translated as malm, but it is effectively like what someone with Down syndrome would sound like laughing, or it's like the caricature of that. And it's really horrible to see it performed in public, on a bus, in restaurants, and it's just a thing that happens. And every now and then the frame is wide enough that you can see someone's head snap around to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's 2000 and let's say 18.
Yeah. I think like the thing that I latched on to more was like almost more in the jackass sense, of like stumbling around, falling over in the store, like really like Buster Keaton style slapstick idiocy. But The Idiots is, I would assume, if released now, would have a different response. Not that it wasn't controversial, but I think it would be controversial in almost like a different sense now.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. You simply cannot do that kind of response to it.
Yeah. Which makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I get the problem with the film is that you have to see it to understand the larger context, right? And that's a stumbling block these days for art.
Yeah.
If someone hears something has been labeled difficult, that's enough. They either won't see it or they'll echo it. I mean, it's just the outgrowth of social media and instant response where you have to have a take, right? But I mean, like right now we have arguments about Killers of the Flower Moon and whether or not it should exist at all as a white man's film. Whereas, I would argue that maybe Martin Scorsese at this point in his career is the only person who could have made the film at the scale that it's made and told it the way he tells it and be sympathetic. And there simply isn't a way to get a studio to finance a film by an indigenous filmmaker on that scale. So it's a conflict that you have to resolve and you have to understand before you can resolve it. And that requires seeing the movie. And people are already complaining that the movie is too long. So they're not doing that either. It's just this endless cycle. And your own work is all about sort of knee-jerk responses to things without trying to understand them, which is a wonderful way to segue into both Sick of Myself and Dream Scenario, which are about people who are sort of trapped in cycles of their own, not of their own making necessarily, but the be careful what you wish for aspect of Dream Scenario is absolutely wonderful and deeply thorny.
Yeah. And I would say, like, with what we're just talking about, just the idea that portrayal of something isn't condoning it.
Exactly. Depiction is not endorsement.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an important thing for an audience to remember, that we can show like terrible behavior without, what is it in like academia, it's descriptive versus normative.
Mm-hmm.
It's like describing something doesn't mean that you're saying it's morally right or wrong. You're just describing it. And that's, I think, just tools of that the audience need. They need like a way to understand things, and it's a little bit on the audience too, to sort of engage with something in a more complicated or complex way than simply this is wrong or this is right.
Oh, I agree. The worst thing about the state of understanding art right now is the death of ambiguity and the need people have to explain things. And when they don't understand something, or maybe they looked away from the screen because they were doing something else instead of watching the damn movie, that becomes a plot hole. It's like, no. And the proliferation of explainers online and things. I mean, I'm sure Dream Scenario is going to be an endless inspiration for those sites, because and I don't think this constitutes a spoiler, your absolute refusal to explain anything about what's happening and stranding us in the position of Nicolas Cage's character, who is utterly helpless to change anything. Although looking back, it's pretty clear to see where he influences the path of events. I loved watching people argue about it after the festival screening at TIFF, because it was so clear everybody had absolutely understood the film, but nobody liked understanding it. They wanted to know how other people interpreted it, which is exactly how one interprets dreams, right? The first thing you do is ask someone else what you think that dream meant.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's always such a joy to discover a mystery of the world. Like when we realized that there was a discrepancy in the general public between the blue dress or yellow dress phenomenon, and there was like a new thing that was a mystery for a little bit until we sort of like figure out exactly what was going on. And cinema is a place where you can create mystery, and we can live with the sense of trying to understand it ourselves. And I always think that movies should come with some assembly required, that it's not like prefabricated and finished. It comes in pieces and you do the assembly. And I want to like sort of as an audience member while writing, there's just an enjoyment of the mystery for me too. And I don't want to like go there and explain because I'm not interested in it.
I keep coming back to Breaking the Waves and how it maintains its ambiguity right up until the very last shot, at which point it becomes something truly beautiful. And I think the reason I love it so much is because Von Trier validates something that.
You mean the like godly,
the bells, yeah, the bells in the sky. And also because they look just a tiny bit phony.
Yeah.
Just a little bit like imagination. Like if you had to invent heavenly bells, this is what they would probably look like. Like someone had drawn them and that they were hastily put together.
Yeah.
And it sent me out of the theater on such a high, which was so weird. I'm not a believer by any means, but I do enjoy movies that validate worldviews when it's called for. Yeah. And then I saw something like, then I saw The Idiots, which is, well, that's the bad example. But I think something like Dancer in the Dark, where he gives you the complete opposite. It's a godless universe. No good deed is unpunished, and there is only misery and sacrifice. And both films are about martyrs. But weirdly enough, the one that ended hopefully is the one that I prefer, from Lars Von Trier. And I think it's because even then it's the depression talking. I can feel him trying to find reason to go forward.
Well, I'm like at the end of Dancer in the Dark, I'm like crying, but I'm also feeling Lars Von Trier laughing at me for crying. You know? That he manipulated me in that way. Because again, that's like the almost like almost a parody of the like Russian literature, depression, everything's miserable, and dragging a character through so much misery, you know, and that there's no hope. And she, you know, talk about save the cat, you know, like the character, she's going blind and all she wants is to make enough money to pay for surgery for her son. She's so selfless. He really is, you know, playing into the book, doing it by the book, and doing it so extreme that you almost have to laugh about it.
Yeah, it's I think it's incredible too that both of those films end with, they're about martyrdom, and they end with the ultimate act of self-sacrifice. And yeah, you're right. He's showing us in Dancer in the Dark. It's like, well, look, this is how it could have gone. You could have felt just terrible. Yeah. And it doesn't, like, it feels like it's too intimate to behold. And I think Björk's performance is the thing that keeps me from allowing me to disconnect fully, because she's not laughing at herself. She's playing it as honestly as possible. And that rawness.
That's really important to me. The Del Close quote of "play to the top of your intelligence" is something that stuck with me with comedy, because it's so easy to lean in on the joke of the scene, like go for the low-hanging fruits where we collectively make fun of the character. But if we don't allow the character to break his own integrity, it's going to feel more painful. And that's my humor, is in sort of the tragedy. So not letting any of the characters in on the genre. They're oblivious to it being a comedy. They're helplessly stuck inside of a drama, and they can't get out of the drama. Like, that's where I think I find humor.
It's certainly, I'm just actively trying to protect Dream Scenario for the listener, so they don't have any spoilers. But how do you spoil something like this? It is such a pleasure to watch the how can I put it, the refraction of Cage throughout the film, and the ways he embraces different versions of him. I mean, he is ultimately playing the quintessential Nicolas Cage character, which is that everybody has an idea of him in their head as larger than life and bigger and wider and broader. And you've given him the room to do that, but it always comes back to this small man whose world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and who doesn't go over the top, and who is his responses in, you know, quote unquote, the real world are utterly credible. They're never preposterous. He's bewildered, he's angry, he's lost, he's alone, but at no point does he, turn into a rooster or anything like that. He never goes as big as he could be. I've always argued that Nicolas Cage is just an opera singer in the wrong career.
Yeah.
But in a small mode, when you pull it down into him, it's still magical. It's just quiet.
Yeah. I had a friend fly in from Norway to be at the LA premiere of Dream Scenario. And he told me after the movie that he was like baffled that, I got Nicolas Cage in the movie, but then I'm just like dragging him through hell, like not giving him any sort of, moment of optimism or anything. He's just like, he gets I throw him under the bus, but it's like what I like to do with my characters, I think. At least until now. Maybe I won't do it in the next one, but like I really just, for some reason, love seeing a flawed character suffer the consequences of their flaws as a way to like exercise my own demons and say like, this is what you'll get if you like lean into those negative traits.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sick of Myself is about someone who obliterates herself
Yeah.
to be known. And
or,
Dream Scenario is
empathy is like how I saw it. I just remember being in a relationship makes my experience, the phenomenology of experience in a relationship is different. And it's performative in a way that if I'm alone and I have a headache, that headache is really manageable and I just try to ignore it. But in a relationship, I need the other person to acknowledge my headache and I need to perform it so that they understand how big of a deal it is. And we have to like collectively mourn my headache. And there's something about that in a relationship that Sick of Myself, they're kind of like starving each other for that type of sympathy or attention. And it runs amok in that relationship. And I think that because we live in today and we all know sort of what motivates the Western world, we tend to extrapolate that to mean that she's social media addicted or something. We don't even show her on social media in the film. I've seen so many examples of reviews talking about like, this is a movie about social media, and that's where that's something that's in the head of the reviewer. That's where but again, like, as I say, like, I want some assembly required. I want you to put the pieces together. If that's your takeaway, that's fine. But I think that some people are just saying that it is about that it's like a fact.
Yeah, no, people argue the metaphor. I guess I should have said to be seen, even if it's just by her partner.
Being validated, yes, exactly.
But that's what I meant. It's about the desperation to exist, right? Like to be seen to exist. And in Dream Scenario, you have someone who wants people to stop seeing him. Ultimately,
yeah. Well, I think he has an idea of a healthy amount of sort of recognition and for something healthy like academic achievements.
Mm-hmm.
But he's so like his idea of himself is so divorced from how other people see him, and I think he's delusional. And he is we meet that character at sort of the final straw of like closing the door on academic recognition. It's the like last attempt at like pleading with a former colleague to at least credit him on a paper that he hasn't contributed to at all. And because he's so starved of it, that's an interesting character to see go through this like insane dream phenomenon, and how he will respond to it in all the wrong ways because he thinks he can get something healthy, something that's desired in his life. He thinks he can get that out of that. And the movie sort of looking at both the discrepancy between a person and persona, but also like how just recognition in its own is like can be horrific and undesirable, and that there's this like contract that we set up with ourselves, that our happiness is held hostage to a unattainable goal somewhere in the future. And I will make sure that I won't be happy until I reach that. And here you have a man who is like a tenured professor at a nice university, who has a nice family and a lovely wife, and for some reason is making himself miserable. And that's something I thought of with, the whole experiment of the welfare state, which I've grown up in, that there's like all of these miserable people who are living safe and sort of materialistically good lives, but there's still ways that we make ourselves miserable, and it's sort of like the angle which you view life from needs to be reconfigured. Yeah, I don't know what the question was, but
No, we covered a lot. It's just such a rich text to explore. And again, I don't want to explore too much of it before people get the chance to see it. So I'll pull back and I will ask the closer, which is the same on every episode. And it's simply, is there anything from the movie we've been discussing that you've borrowed or homaged or outright stolen for your own work? Is there anything in The Idiots? I didn't see anything in Dream Scenario. There's no dogma dream.
Yeah, no, it's pretty far removed from like surface level. I think what you can recognize, I guess, is a sort of maybe a little bit mean-spirited humor. That there's humor coming from tragedy, and it's not really a clear answer to where it's okay to laugh or not, which I think really that's like the whole nature of The Idiots. And that's just that might come from being early exposed to Lars Von Trier and having him sort of take root in my subconscious, that there's might be something of that voice in my head when I'm writing. And sometimes actually, now that I think of it, with Sick of Myself, I remember being stuck on a draft and then thinking, let me pretend that I'm Lars Von Trier, helping myself write another draft of the script. And I wrote a whole draft through the sort of emulation of Lars Von Trier. So he's definitely like sort of part of my inner monologue somehow. And I'm just like really grateful for all the sort of risks that he's taken. He's like he's opened doors so that we all can walk through them,
even if you stumble and fall over.
Yeah, exactly. Stumbling through his doors.
My thanks to Kristoffer Borgli, whose new film Dream Scenario is now playing in the US and Toronto and opening across the rest of Canada this Friday. Thanks also to Claire Peace McConnell. She knows what she did. You can follow Kristoffer on Instagram at Kristogger, Kristogger, and you might be able to find the Alliance DVD of The Idiots kicking around in a used bin somewhere, but you're going to have more luck finding that film streaming on Mubi in the US and Canada. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.